Hey y'all, and welcome to Geospatial Experiences. I'm your host, Melissa Mayo, and I'm an Esri engineer on the product team. This podcast focuses on the application of geographic information. Let's go on a journey together with some of my amazing coworkers, along with Esri customers, partners, and distributors who are doing really cool work in the field of GIS. All right, welcome to another episode of Geospatial Experiences. I am really excited to have the guest that we're going to chat with today. We are being joined by Brian Baldwin. He's with the Esri Education team. He's a lead solution engineer. He's been on my list of guests to bring on the podcast for a while. So, like I said, I'm super excited to have him on today. Brian, thanks so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Melissa. Really excited to be here. Really fun to be invited to be on the podcast.
I think it's going to be a good one. I know you're going to have a lot of gems for us, and we're going to be able to go through such a good conversation.
I hope so. Pressure's on, right?
Pressure's on, absolutely. So we start all of these with asking everybody about their geospatial journey. So tell us about your journey. How did you get started in the geospatial field?
Cool. So my start in geospatial, I won't take it all the way back to fourth grade. But when I got to college, I was majoring in history. And I remember taking a kind of just like global geography course. That was just kind of a required course as part of my undergraduate degree at SUNY Geneseo and outside of Rochester. And it was taught through the geography department, kind of one of those big kind of catch-all courses that's trying to maybe grab folks to come look at being majors or get interested in the discipline. And from that, I remember kind of wandering over to, the geography lab and the geography department. And it was just this really cool community of people that were just doing all of this kind of amazing work and amazing research. And from that, it was kind of the bug that bit me. And, I enrolled in a couple, geography courses and ended up taking kind of the first intro GIS course, which really kind of brought me into kind of the geospatial GIS side of things. Anytime I give a lecture, do presentations to students, as you mentioned, I'm on like the education team, so that's a lot of my work now. But I always tell students like I hated, I hated intro GIS. Like I remember taking the course, and it wasn't the worst course I probably took. That probably went to Spanish, which I completely bombed. But yeah, it was just really hard, and it was kind of hard to understand and grasp and grapple. And like at the time we are using an ArcView like 3x license. And I remember like for the side project, I had been excited to kind of map this bicycle route I was trying to do. And I remember opening up the software and just looking at it and going, oh, there's no data. Like, what do you do? What do you do? And it was just felt like that for a long time. And so that was really kind of my kickstart into GIS, was like that intro course. I took an advanced course in the program there. And then what ended up kind of clicking for me or really making me, fall in love with it was in the advanced course, I ended up having this kind of map project where we were showing the death of these towns, or I was showing the death of this town in central Pennsylvania. Some people might know it's called Centralia. Have you ever heard of it, Melissa?
Huh, I haven't.
So it's the coolest story. I won't go on a huge tangent with it, but there's this coal seam that runs under the town. So it was kind of this, mining town for years, but then a fire started down in the coal seams, and it's going to burn for the next 8,000 years or something. So the fire's still burning. There's still kind of smoke and coming out of the ground. And so the town has been kind of slowly evacuated and people have been leaving it. And so I had these maps, this just kind of sequence of three maps to show the kind of people leaving the town and houses kind of going away from these USGS maps. And from that, it was this kind of beautiful visual that just kind of made me understand like, oh, this can be a really neat way to communicate information. And from that, I kind of took that little bit of GIS knowledge and carrying it on with me in my career.
I love that story so much, Brian. I also hated my intro class, if that makes you feel better.
I know. I think there's a lot of us out there that it's like that first course, it's just, and so yeah, for students, I say that a lot where, even if they're going to take one or two courses, like just try to grab on to some of the things that are exciting or seem useful about it, because yeah, it can be frustrating at times. And there's parts of the technology that can be really hard to grasp and understand, but it can be a really useful tool. And it can be something that even if you don't think, like, I even remember at the time I was like, I never want to sit at a computer and like just that's be my only job. And
Mhm.
now here we are, but I still get to like see the light and go outside, which is good. So
I know it's so fun because, you do think back to those days when you're sitting in the lab and you're just in there at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're like, I don't know why this isn't working. This is so foreign. Why is this so hard? And then,
yeah, yeah.
something finally clicks and you go, oh, wait, okay, this is okay. I can do this. I get it. This is, this is the thing I need to be doing. It's like once something finally clicks. And then, you're one of the best in the business, Brian, now. So I mean, look how far you've come. Like you're amazing, especially teaching people and trying to pass that knowledge and educate them. You're really good at it. So I feel like you found a niche area here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love, I mean, and that's the thing I think I tell people all the time too, is you don't need to be, a programmer, per se. I think a lot of students or a lot of people coming into GIS, and especially now, it's the buzz is data science and computing and programming, and so everybody coming in, or not everybody, but a lot of people kind of coming into the field or learning about it think like, oh, I need to know how to code, I need to know how to program to get into this field. And that's not the case for everybody at all. And so for me, like, I love to teach, I love to present, I love to kind of build and tell stories. And I don't know C sharp at all or C++. I mean, there's a little bit of that kind of dabbling with Python or other bits of programming automation for sure, but there's a wide array of skills you can kind of bring into this field.
Mhm. Absolutely. And so once you kind of found your love for GIS and found, your skill sets for it, you moved from, school and moved into being able to use it in real life. So how did you kind of make that transition and make your way to Esri? I know you taught for a bit and you still teach, right?
Yeah,
Adjunct?
yeah.
You still adjunct teacher? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So I graduated, got my undergraduate degree in geography and history. After that, I went into the Peace Corps, so spent 2 years in China, kind of teaching at a small technical college in Sichuan province. Wasn't doing anything GIS related there. But then when I came back from China, I thought I had this like amazing set of skills. And looking back, it's so funny because I had my undergraduate degree, which is great. I had like the 2 years of Peace Corps experience, but I just kind of assumed like people would be like running to me wanting to hire me because I was this like amazingly rounded global person, which was not the case at all. So I ended up moving to Duluth, Minnesota, where my girlfriend and I at the time, I'd met her in China. She had also been a volunteer. So we kind of moved near where her family was to kind of find our grounding in the States and figure out what to do. And there was a bunch of kind of weird jobs I was kind of trying to walk to an interview for. And there was this small nonprofit in Duluth that was doing kind of community GIS work. And I remember literally walking in the door of this place and just going into them and saying, hey, I want a job. Like, what can I do? Can I do something here? And they were like, and the owner, this guy Tony at the time was like, what, like who are you and what's going on? And I think they were just confused and loved kind of the fact that I was just bold enough to come in and say, hire me. Like, I have, at that time, again, I had taken two kind of courses in GIS, didn't know anything, but kind of thought I knew, a lot. And through that, I ended up working there for about a year and getting a lot of kind of on the ground experience doing some pretty boring stuff, but really learning the tools, learning how to use it. And from there, ended up going to graduate school, got a degree in urban and regional planning at the University of New Orleans. And the experience there, and kind of like you can picture this like stack of skills building. I had the maybe year of like actual work experience, a little bit of undergraduate time. And then in graduate school, I found myself as like the GIS person. And again, this is with just this little itty bitty skill set. But when we needed to do analysis or do maps, or we were going to kind of planning meetings, it was like, oh, Brian knows how to use this tool. Like he can be the one. And so I ended up working with nonprofits, and it was an amazing time to be down in New Orleans. It was like 2007 to 2009. So, 2 years after Katrina, and the city was just this living laboratory of kind of rebuilding and planning and work. And so it was still like holds such a special place in my heart. I just love New Orleans. And yeah, just had like 2 amazing years there of kind of working with nonprofits and getting more GIS exposure. Moved from there to Hawaii, did some invasive species kind of mapping and planning, worked with the county government, then moved to Milwaukee for about a year and a half doing crime analysis work. That was me kind of getting back into GIS. And then I applied for a role at Esri at that time and kind of came into the company about 10 years or so back. And I always say this too is, I think at that time I was really nervous because I'd kind of jumped from thing to thing, every year and a half or 2 years,
Mhm.
finishing grad school. And I was like, oh God, like, how am I going to apply for Esri? And they're going to look and see that I have these like, crime analysis work to invasive species. Like this guy doesn't have any clue what he wants to do. What like he's just jumping all over the place. And the boss who I ended up working for at the time, I can remember still clearly in my interview, he goes, wow, we love that you have this like diverse array of experience and the ways you can kind of think of and use GIS. I was like, oh wow, I did not
Mhm.
expect you to say that. So I mean, that's something too, I think is, the more kind of experiences you can have, like don't worry about grabbing a job or a position in some field that might seem a little weird or off if it's some of your first kind of positions in GIS. Like just go for it, get some experience, and then you can apply that, as you kind of grow in your career.
We talk about that a lot on the podcast
Oh,
as far
cool.
how do you, get that experience or have those experiences and then be able to apply what you've learned.
Yeah.
Taking those exposures and using those to apply them to GIS or apply
Yeah.
them to new problems to solve. And so that's a theme that kind of comes up on the podcast a
Oh,
lot.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think just and you mentioned, yeah, so I've taught on the side for a bit, even while I'm at Esri. So, love to work with students, kind of love the education field. And always just kind of, as students are finishing up or they're in their junior year or senior year, if they're in a graduate program, I always encourage them, kind of be bold, especially now. It's so easy to hit the apply button and, you can shoot your resume off or apply to 100 jobs in 5 minutes.
Hmm.
But so many of those jobs and so many of those things, it's again, it's as easy as it is to apply for, it's that easy to just delete on the inbox on the other side. So you've got to be kind of aggressive or bold with your outreach. And, it's my one kind of personal anecdote I mentioned already, but it's like go, if it's via LinkedIn or if it's via email or even going to that company or that office, like go just be bold and kind of put yourself in there and show them that you're excited, that you care, that you want to be there. Um, yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of the skill set or experience in the same way, like don't be afraid to kind of take a position or a job that might be outside of where you're from or your town. Just go for it to grab some experience, see a new place, even if it's a year or 2 years you invest somewhere, like that will create so much growth for you. You can then take to kind of the dream job or the job you want to kind of move into in your field or in your career.
I feel like you had some amazing experiences from moving around and being able to go, live in Hawaii and live here and live in New Orleans and, all that stuff. It just, I feel like that just builds not only your skill sets, but your personality too. It builds kind
Yeah.
of how you see the world and how you look at problems. You just have a different worldview when you've moved around and shifted around and you've lived other places too. You gain different perspectives.
I know. I never would have appreciated a crawfish boil as I do today, Now I just and I'm still so we've got my wife's family has a cabin up in northern Minnesota, and for years there's crawfish all over this lake, and I've like just schemed and dreamed of like building a trap and like having a boil up there, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna happen maybe this summer, one of these years it's gonna happen, but their minds are still blown because it's like, no, those are just the things like kids catch and put in the little pool and play with rocks. I'm like, no, this is potatoes and corn and garlic, and we we can figure this out.
That's hilarious. You just need some Cajuns to go up there
I
and do.
know, right? Oh, they'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out. If it's moving, they'll eat it. They'll put it in. If they're not putting it in a gumbo, they'll put it in something. They'll put oil or. So what was it about Esri that drew you? Was Esri kind of that dream job and it's, the mecca for GIS people type thing, or was it the perfect job that opened up, or was it
Yeah,
just that time for you to kind of shift and look for something else? What was it that drew you?
I think it was a bunch of those things. I mean, even going through like my undergraduate program and using ArcView, and I remember we finally got, I think we like upgraded to ArcMap 9.0 like when we were there. Esri was always kind of there and a presence, and I remember a huge experience for me that was and just so funny because I remember it's also the connection to Esri with it. I ended up getting to present a paper at the American Association of Geographers of the AAG conference one year as an undergraduate, and had a poster and kind of brought that out to Denver. And I had kind of volunteered as a student worker to be able to kind of help pay for the costs and defer it and get me into the conference. And I remember it was so funny. I'm looking down and my job was to like print off name badges. So, people would walk up and I'd print off their name badge and, hand it to them and say welcome. And Jack Dangerman, came up, and I don't know if he was with somebody or somebody else, but it was just so funny now in retrospect. He came right up to me and was like, and I had no idea who he was. And he's like,
Mhm.
oh, yeah, Jack Dangerman. I'm like, okay, sure, let me look you up here quick, Jack. Da, 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 da. And like print off his badge and hand it over to him, and he strolls away. And two or three people were like, you know who that is, right? And I'm like, no, what? Like, yeah, I print off his name badge, but what's the deal? And they're like, he's Jack Dangerman. Like, okay, any yeah, and
And
and so from that, like even that like lodged into my mind for years. And yeah, I just always loved kind of the culture that I saw from Esri, the publications. And then yeah, I remember being in grad school and we ended up getting a short story about some of the work we were doing in New Orleans into one of the Arc News publications. That was about kind of the rebuilding of the city and some of the kind of boots on the ground mapping and data collection we were doing. So yeah, it was always kind of this place that I kind of saw and was excited to try to apply for and get into. And not that all my time was just building up experience to get to Esri, but after I was in Milwaukee, I saw this position get posted, and it was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Like, let's go for it and make the move.
I love that. That's such a fun story. And you know what? I bet Jack loved the fact that you didn't know who he was, because everybody knows who he is. That we fangirl and fanboy about it, and I'm like, I'm just not, I'm not going to be able to, come up with a coherent sentence is what's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
So I bet he loved the fact that you didn't have a clue, and you just treated him like a regular normal person,
Right.
and
Yeah.
kept your faculties about you and everything. So what is it like? Because you're on the education team here. So what is it like to work at Esri, to work on the education team here, and what are your primary responsibilities as?
Great question. Yeah. So it's really fun too because I've got, a couple different experiences at Esri. So I worked prior on our utilities team as a solution engineer. I worked on a team before that that was basically kind of our technical marketing team, which was I was working with the utilities group at that time. So I've got a couple different kind of perspectives on the different roles or different ways you can work at Esri. And so my role right now is a solution engineer, and I'm on our kind of sales or global business development team. And it's such a fun, such a fun position. I mean, our job is literally to help students, help researchers, and help, academics, understand what software they have access to, help them use the software and kind of help them solve problems, use it in their teaching. And then we also work closely with kind of the operations side. So there's still that touch, the tie to either utilities or indoor spaces and facilities management. And we also have a bunch of folks that are working with kind of K through 12 schools. But my role, at least, is specifically working kind of academic and, really across the globe. So it's, how is kind of GIS being taught now, and just ensuring that kind of faculty, students, staff are aware of all the changes, because it does move so quickly and it's really hard to kind of, even for even for me to like stay up to speed with all the changes and all the new things, because there's just so much. And it's like the Esri ecosystem's huge, And so you can only imagine, like, for a faculty member that's trying to keep their, intro GIS course up to date, and keep teaching kind of core skills about why geospatial is important. And now, lo and behold, ArcGIS Urban, is released, and there's this new way of teaching city and urban and regional planning, and like that, plus the 500 other different kind of tools and applications. So just trying to kind of keep folks up to speed with what's there is a big part of the job, and really kind of keep them excited and let them know all the different things they can do with the tools.
My next question, you kind of already answered it, but there may be something you want to expand on, so I'll go ahead and pitch it to you. So, how does the
Yeah,
team assist customers in the education space, and how do you engage with the new customers too?
great
So,
question.
it sounds like you're keeping them up to date on things and up to speed, but beyond that, how do you really plug in with them?
Yeah, we do a bunch of different things. So, similar to Esri, itself, we have through at the user conference what we call like our Ed Summit. So we have a
Okay.
big kind of user event, which is, the yearly point to kind of pull together educators, pull together teachers, researchers, and have the community kind of share what's happening, what's taking place. And again, in this big forum to have build community kind of throughout the rest of the year. And then we have, webinars, events, and, kind of trying to do things in person. And then a lot of stuff we do as well is just really engaging one on one. So, through obviously that big kind of community work. Um, like one example is in 2 days, I'm going to be driving down to Boston University, and we've got this kind of summer group of engineering students that are coming together. They're working with real kind of projects in the community to apply and solve different problems. And so my role is in a 2-hour workshop, kind of show them what GIS is, how they could use it, how they could hopefully apply it and use it in this kind of summer project and with their kind of specific problem set they're trying to use. And then step back and hopefully let them kind of see what they can do with it and how they can solve some problems. So there's a lot of just really kind of one-on-one things we do, and we love for people to just reach out to us with any questions, problems, if it's students or faculty. And that can either be, myself helping, or it's us going, pulling in folks from support, or either other teams across Esri, which is, fantastic. Our education team isn't made of thousands of people. There's two of us that are the solution engineers on the education team, kind of as the the frontline technical support. But then if they're faculty interested in imagery, we'll pull in somebody from our imagery team. Or if they're interested in the utility network, we can kind of reach out and pull in somebody from our utilities team. So it's really kind of across Esri, helping kind of support this community of users.
It feels like you have to know a lot of people at Esri too to be able to plug and grab and snag and go, okay, let's pair this group up with this person and pair this one up. So you have to know all of us, Brian.
I know, I know. I've got my little OneNote cheat sheet of, network analyst. Who do I need to reach out to
Mhm.
for that? Or parcel fabric, and that part's really funny because on the utilities team, certainly I would have to use different products and tools, but like in the education space, it's every other day can be something completely wildly different. And it might be a researcher who spent 30 years of their lives like knowing that thing inside and out, so you can't fake it.
Mhm.
So at those times you really need to reach out and do the kind of phone a friend.
Mhm. So what happens if there's a university or a program within a university that wants to bring GIS in and they're new to the space and they're new to it? How do they kind of get that ball rolling if they haven't already, been plugged in with it, if they don't already have that available?
Oh, good question. So we've got a program at through Esri that provides, first, on the K through 12 side, anybody who's at a school or K through 12 or a kind of community student-led organization can get licenses for free, for kind of anybody at that school, anybody in that program for educational uses. So I'll get a link to y'all and you can have it up somewhere and people can click and get access to that. And then on the higher ed side, there are steeply discounted licenses. So first off, I've given some webinars to, faculty, students, and my joke to them all is, you probably don't think you do, but you probably have a license already. And a
Mhm.
lot of times, students or staff aren't even aware that their university has a license, has access to everything. So that's the first thing I say is like you probably already have the license available. The second one is if folks want to get started, the prices are incredibly, discounted. So for a departmental license for users, if they want to have 50, students, faculty, it's $500
Oh,
for them
wow.
to have like 50 users, and that's access to basically everything.
Mhm.
Pro, ArcGIS Online, amazing list of kind of resources and tools and extensions. Um, and it was funny the other day we were on a call and this one researcher was like, oh, we don't have a license. And I said, okay, well, it's $500. And he was like, oh, okay, that's not bad. And he was thinking that was like per user per the 50. I'm like, no, that's for all of it. And he was like, oh, okay, we'll just buy it right now. I don't know what, yeah, why. He's like, sorry, we even had this conversation. I'm like, no, it's fine. Just
Mhm.
reach out.
That's funny. Well, I love that as we're supporting the education field in that way because, a lot of times it is hard for the faculty to be able to get money together to be able to fund that. And,
Yeah.
everything's all about funding. And so, I know the universities want to give the best possible tools and resources for their students as well. And so with Esri being so supportive of it, it really enables them to be able to put more, the money that they would have to spend otherwise if it was more expensive into the students and into other things as well. So I know that's helpful for getting the universities plugged in and started.
Yeah, and even kind of putting some of that money into their labs or into computing
Mhm.
resources, and then also, they get discounted. So we have even universities that are using kind of the instructor-led trainings because they'll get kind of discounted training. So, hey, let's do one for enterprise for students, or let's do some of these other certifications.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, because the licenses, they have available. It's about exposure using the software, and then there's so much more they can do with it. And yeah, just you mentioned it's like the funding, and that's a huge issue right now with a lot of community colleges and smaller programs. And so
Mhm.
that's been really nice where the license is something that they can just utilize, use, have access to. And, it's if you go Google on LinkedIn or if you go look for jobs, like there's just a research paper that came out about this is everyone's looking for, experience using, ArcGIS or Esri tools. So students even having that 1 to 2 courses or one class, like they've got something they can put on their resume, a line item, and it's going to get them, that leg up when they're starting to look for jobs or look for internships.
Mhm. It makes them look just that little bit more desirable. It pushes them ahead of the other people that didn't have that, don't have that on there. So it's
Yeah.
a really good thing.
Oh, for sure.
So Brian, what interesting things are going on in the education field these days?
I think like everywhere, education as well is trying to figure out kind of what it means to have AI or data science, some of these bigger kind of buzzy terms and phrases that are bopping around kind of every industry. And so how do those things impact or how do they influence, where the geospatial field is going and what changes are taking place? Um, and then on like a more kind of immediate place, there's been a lot of programs and I totally get this too, the struggle with just kind of updating your materials or updating your courses. There's
Mhm.
a lot of faculty that aren't really paid for that time. They have a course and they're paid for the instructional time, but spending all summer to build that course out and revise it, like it's just kind of on them. Um, and so it can be a real challenge to stay up to speed and stay up to date with the latest tools, the latest technology. And so that's a real big push of ours right now on the Esri side is just to remind faculty, remind students, and kind of put it in front of them along with resources and stories and case studies of other programs that have kind of made a shift to more web-based GIS and how that is also kind of the shift that's taking place in industry in a lot of places. So similar to the last thing I said on, exposure experiences, it's great for students to come out of a program and know, how to run some spatial analysis tools and build a map layout. It's a lot better for them to come out, knowing how to design a dashboard or know how to, run a notebook or know how to have attribute rules set up with a geodatabase. It's some of these things that 5 years ago didn't even exist. And so trying to get those things into the programs as fast as we can is a really big kind of constant push.
So, what about challenges? What are your customers facing as far as challenges go? I know you're kind of covering the AI and all of those topics as well, but what other challenges beyond that are they having to deal with?
I think I mean, one of the biggest challenges facing higher ed right now are just kind of the enrollment challenges. And
Mhm.
that really has to do with just population. I mean, it comes down to basic demographics. The US population, it hasn't stagnated, but it is kind of flattened off a little bit. And so, a lot of these universities and programs in college were kind of relying on, unlimited growth of people and competition to come in. So there's a lot of programs that are kind of struggling to find their place, and it's a lot more competitive now, not even for the schools, but for the programs themselves, where, if a certain degree or if a certain certificate isn't seen as something that's going to get students jobs or get them, um, you know, give them something, back, then there's really not that incentive for them to kind of follow that path and do it. And so a lot of the GIS programs have had to be a lot more almost kind of marketers or marketing savvy. And so just really shifting, because I would say maybe 10, 15 years ago, they had to like kind of close the doors and say, hey, no more, no more people. We've got too many people coming in and doing these programs and certificates. And now with that kind of mix of factors, it's needing to be more proactive and kind of show how GIS and geospatial is so prevalent in all of these different fields. And I think that's been one of the challenges is even kind of the term, not to dive into the weeds on the semantics, but
Mhm.
like, somebody says GIS, and still, I think for all of us who are in this field, you're at like the classic barbecue or cocktail party, and someone's like, "What do you do?" And like, here we go.
How do I
And
answer this,
it takes
right?
us all like, yeah, we all had to take like 5 minutes to explain, and people's eyes glaze over and they go, "Oh, okay, anyway," and fade off. And so it's almost doing a better kind of job saying what we do, and because there's so many amazing kind of use cases and stories and the ways this technology is getting used. But when a student goes to college, none of them know, if they say, I want to help with, climate change, and I want to help, invasive species, or I want to work with, Jane Goodall and all these things. None of them say, oh, I want to be, a GIS specialist when I grow up. It's kind of these ways that the technology can help and play a huge role, but nobody understands like what is supporting that, or what skills you need to know to do it. And it's that shift that really needs to happen a lot more, I think.
I like the fact that, you're exploring, and I'm trying to get my thoughts and my words together. I like the fact that you're exploring kind of the enrollment and the communication as far as the programs go and the skill sets. And, we've
Yeah.
talked about that on the podcast too, as far as just the being able to communicate in this field and communicate what we do and kind of how applicable GIS is in so many different fields. You think about it. Oh, I studied geography and I studied GIS and literally Remy and I were somewhere the other day and someone said, "Oh, so place names and capitals." And I'm like, "No, I'm not your person for Trivial Pursuit. Do not call me for that.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
not my
not
thing.
that's not my thing. No. Call me about plants, call me about something else. Don't call me about that. That's not what we do." And then they want to know, well, if you studied geography, then what did you do? And so
Yeah.
it leads into that longer, deeper conversation. And I remember when I went and I changed, I was one of those people that changed my major a few times. And when I landed in geography and fell in love with it, most people were like, well, what are you going to do with that? And my mom was like, "Baby, I love you and I want you to be happy, but I'm gonna need you to be able to make some money." And I said, "Don't worry, mama, I got you." And my dad, who is in forestry, and they were using
Yeah.
GIS and things like that, he's like, "Oh no, that's great." And I felt like I got into it at a really good time as the field was kind of starting to take off a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, dad got it, and an engineer, my best friend, her now husband was in engineering program, and he was taking some GIS too. And he's like, "Oh no, yeah, no, that's a good one."
Oh, funny.
Um,
Yeah, I find that all the time too. People either they 100% it clicks for them, or it's kind of, what GIS is, you get it, or almost like your dad's story there. The number two is like, yep, Forestry, oh, I got like that makes a lot of sense. Like they just get it, and kind of the way of answering questions or looking at data and maps, etc. And it's like, oh, it's like, duh, of course that makes sense. And then there's the third, kind of like my dad, who's like, I still don't know what he does. Like he hasn't asked me for money in a couple of years, so I think
Yeah,
we're good, but we'll see.
exactly. Oh my goodness. So what is the difference for you and your team? I know you're primarily in the academic in the university space, and then you have others who are, supporting the high schools. But what's the difference between kind of supporting those? Does your team kind of approach that in different ways? Are there different, um, uh, not tools, but are there different methods that you use, and are different things important in the academic space versus in maybe a high school space? I hope I'm
Yeah.
asking that in a good way.
Yeah, no,
I
great
hope that makes
question.
sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would say on the high school side, the I mean, I guess there's a lot of differences. I mean, a couple of the biggest ones are just the kind of scope. You think
Mhm,
of I think we have a lot of I think we have a lot of people we work with in higher education, and there's thousands of universities, but then when you think of the amount of K through 12 schools across the globe, it's hundreds of thousands who are potential, accounts and students and people to engage with. And I think, that's number one. It's like just the scope of it. So there's no way, that team can have a one-on-one with a relationship with like each of
mhm,
those schools and accounts. So it has to be a lot more of kind of broad tools, resources, and materials that gets provided. And then I think the number two of that's a challenge is just, and this continues to evolve and almost relates back to the last thing we were just talking about, is STEM is still kind of a huge buzzy thing in K through 12, and getting that kind of exposure to skills. And so GIS is part of that, but in a lot of places it's not introduced, or it's not part of programs, or it's not in the school at all. And I think just for the fact that, again, people just aren't aware of what it is, or know how, or probably just don't even know it's there, what it is, when they could shoot us an email, and they could have access to, the entire school could have a license tomorrow. But the other challenge kind of related to that is just, especially in the US, you know, every single day or every single week is kind of filled up with standards for what needs to be taught, and, all of the curriculum. And so how do you get and kind of almost massage like GIS or geospatial into that?
mhm,
And so that's one of the challenges. And that's one of the things the team has honestly done a really cool job of, is building out, lessons for history, or lessons for chemistry or biology, ways that kind of cross cut with GIS. And hey, here's a way you can look at, obviously, like geology is is kind of a boring, simple one. But hey, let's look at where recent earthquakes have taken place. Let's look at where the fault lines are, and all of these things kind of in a map or in a global context, and get students basically just some more spatial literacy, and kind of get them exposed to those tools. So kind of the array of ways they can use it, and then just trying to get them access to it, I guess.
now, Brian, we love our rocks on this podcast. We love our geology stuff. So, but no, I do love the fact that they're thinking about ways to be able to incorporate GIS and apply it in these
Yeah.
spaces where if you're not a GIS person and you're not geared in that fashion for, okay, how do I get this, and use this tool to help my analytics and my analysis in the space, if that's not kind of your background and kind of what you're focused on. And quite frankly, if you're a K through 12 teacher and you're just trying to survive it, like it's
Yeah.
it has so much else going on too, with all the paperwork and the kids and the parents. And I mean, I just, that was never something I wanted to do. I'm not cut from that cloth.
Yeah.
And so my heart goes out to them as far as what all they have to endure. But
And a big part of that too, I forgot to mention, it goes back to like the first thing I said is, and with the time, it's like, if you think of 10 years ago and trying to have the same conversation, you're probably not going to like fire up ArcView or ArcMap for, a sixth grade teacher and say, all right, here's some cool ways you can maybe use this. Like, I don't have the time. I don't have the
yeah,
time to do that. So there's been, some amazing kind of web-based tools, and if it's
Now
story
we have
maps or other ways.
AGOL.
And yeah, there's a collaboration we just did with National Geographic where a tool called Map Maker, where you can go just have a quick atlas, add layers, kind of search for things, and teachers can even build their own to create these kind of interactive ways to explore data and layers, and just trying to make it easier both for the students, but then also for people that aren't going to be GIS specialists or get a PhD in spatial data science. Like, I just want to be able to use some of this stuff and get into it quickly and easily. So that bar has gotten a lot lower for people.
I think we have an easier entry point for them now than we did,
Yeah,
like you said, 10 years ago with things like AGOL and story maps and just some of these other
totally.
things that, make it easier for them to be able to use parts of the software and be able to do some of the analysis without having to be a full-blown GIS tech for sure.
Yeah.
So how does Esri take an active role in supporting the GIS academics at the K through 12 levels? We've talked about kind of, helping them with, having some lesson plans and things like that that kind of incorporate GIS into it. But beyond that, and is there anything else you kind of want to add as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one I probably mentioned already is just the licenses.
Mhm.
Back, I'm going to make up a year, but it was about 8, 10 years ago or so. Jack made a commitment to say any K through 12 school that wants a license, we'll give one to you. So just the fact that you know there's not to dive into the weeds, but if there's a kid in 6th grade who's really into cities and he wants to dive into City Engine,
Mhm.
like, they have a license available to them and they could get access to it. Or if students just want to explore like simple data and do analysis on stream paths or networks, that's all free and available to them. They just need to request the licenses. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is this, like, all of it is just there ready to use for any schools. Yeah, you mentioned like the name that the team has put together, these things called geo inquiries, which were really built to be kind of like a one pager for teachers to just go grab and have a simple kind of lesson plan that has the objectives, that has kind of the learning outcomes listed for it, so they can dive right in and just have it applied directly to what they're trying to do. And then similarly, there's a big kind of community of users. Charlie Fitzpatrick, who's one of the kind of managers, leaders of the team, has put together these kind of teachers training teachers initiative to
Mhm.
really kind of seed the fact that all this technology, these teachers are out there, and build this community of kind of peers for teachers to kind of train each other for how they can use this stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Are there links that you can give to me that we can put in the show notes
Oh,
for
for sure.
haters or any of this stuff that we can kind of make it easier for them? Because they're probably thinking,
Definitely. Yep,
I don't
we
know.
will barrage you with links, so you'll be good to go.
Okay, we'll put some things down in the show notes too that would be helpful. So,
Awesome.
um, is there anything more that we could be doing to assist teachers in trying to incorporate GIS in their courses? What else? What's the next level that Esri can move to and to be able to kind of support and assist, considering the fact that you guys don't have a huge team either? So,
I mean, the thing I would love to start doing more, and it's honestly about just kind of leveraging the broader community we have at Esri, and I'm still trying to find my footing for how we do it in kind of a in a way that has an impact but doesn't feel overwhelming to people, is almost just kind of involving kind of all of us, in the
mhm.
geospatial community, those at Esri, and then also those like kind of in the geospatial world, to be those kind of evangelists and advocates for what GIS and geospatial is. Because I think um not to bring it back to myself, but it's like, in a couple of weeks ago at my son's school, we had to go, they were doing kind of little presentation. So I get to go in and give a little talk on what I do. And it was great. It was a blast. And like, these kids had no clue, what this is. And it was just so fun to see them so excited about like maps and tools and the ways we could kind of ask questions of the data. And the one thing that I showed them was and it's a pretty common use case, but you can zoom into parts of the Amazon and look at some of the imagery that was taken there 15, 20 years ago, and it looks pretty pristine. And then you walk in 5-year, 1-year increments, and you start to see these kind of roads or this just kind of patchwork of deforestation taking place. And it's just simple images and simple pictures, but the kids got it. It made
Mhm.
sense to them. They understood it. And then you start to say, like, we can also, put numbers to this. We can analyze this. We can say exactly what the percent of deforestation is because of these tools and this technology. It's more than just kind of pictures and pretty maps and, state capitals and place names. It's like helping stop deforestation. It's helping save, X. It's helping all these different things that the tools can be used for. I don't even know what your question was. I just want to.
No, it's fine. My question was just to tee you up for that. That's what my question was for.
Perfect. That's perfect.
No, what I think the great thing about that is what and what I don't you may have mentioned it and I missed it. What grade your son?
He is in fourth grade right now.
Fourth grade. Okay, so fourth grade, and you go in and you're talking to all these other little fourth graders, and they're gonna remember this cool, different presentation. I mean, not that anybody else's parent that goes in and gives a presentation in their field isn't, just as interesting or just as good, but I feel like what we do is just a little bit different. I feel like it's out of the norm and it's out of kind of those traditional, well, my mom's a teacher or my dad's an engineer or my dad's a firefighter or my mom's, stays at
Yeah.
home, whatever it is. I feel like when you say my dad works in a geospatial software company or, whatever it is, I feel like that's a little bit outside of those normal, regular, typical careers
Oh,
that
and
you
that.
hear. And so I feel like that's going to stick with them, is where I was going on that. Like,
Yeah.
and that may plant a seed that could grow into something later, whether they end up being a geospatial tech type person, or if they just go into a field and they go, wait, I saw this guy that did this thing back when I was little and it was really interesting. And let's find out some more about that. I
Yeah. And
mean,
so,
you never know.
so that brings us full circle to your question that I was trying to answer and then just went tangentially off. So I think exactly. So I think like me, your experience, like any of us can help be that person that goes into a school or the science teacher, whoever it is at that school, and just says like, hey, you've like, do you want to use some of these tools, or like, this is some really cool stuff you have available to you, to help be that kind of seed to get this stuff into, different programs or schools. And I'm guilty of this myself. Like I'm preaching, preaching this out, and my son's school still doesn't have a license, so they don't locally. So it's like, I've got to
Yes.
go over there and I can just, send an email and talk to somebody and show them what they have access to. And like anybody at Esri or anybody in the geospatial community can do the same thing. And I think that's helping, show again that it's more than just kind of making parcel maps or street maps, which can be great too. But, there's a lot of really cool ways this technology can be used. And it's just an exciting way to kind of get it in front of kids and the youth.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was my next question too. It's like for me, I don't have kids, so I'm not helping the universities down the line as far as having people to come and join them. But my best friend has three, and so I'm sitting here going, okay, what about their school, and what about other friends' kids' schools that do they have them, and how do we get that in there, and how do we help kind of bridge that gap? And so is that the route that that you guys take it? I mean, just call the school or get with the friends and say, hey, let's check into this and see how do we get this going for them? How do we help the teachers in their programs to be
Yeah.
able to apply this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, and it's probably the case, and it is the case in like every field, right? You need like to find one person that is going to be excited about it and care. So I think it's like it's hard to be, and that's probably the hardest thing is to like find that individual, right?
Mhm.
But I think, yeah, having those kind of conversations, and even in my head, I know my son's like science teacher right now. I've talked to him maybe twice, but just based on kind of the curriculum and the things there he's showing and into. And my son came home thrilled the other day, chatting about like these videos he was watching about like the volcanic eruptions in Iceland, and they were watching like the live webcams. I'm like, oh, like, all right, this guy is a good one to go just have that conversation with. And I think, yeah, to get to what you're saying, if it's just kind of chatting with friends, or if there's somebody at the school that seems like they could be that one, if you could find that one individual to kind of own it, they can then kind of help, even if it's just one class or one lesson, they can be the person and then kind of help introduce it to others in the program. And then they could, coming up at the user conference, we're going to have another group of, K through 12 students up on the stage. And, that's
That's
how it
awesome.
starts, is just these little kind of programs, little projects, and it can boom and blow and blossom into kind of these really cool, things, and taking them into a geospatial career, maybe.
The kids that go on stage blow me away every time. Like I'm just sitting there like, they don't seem nervous. They're just up there rocking and rolling with it. They're like, we're just having a blast in San Diego. But they have really interesting projects and they do really neat work. I don't know. It just every year
Yeah.
they every time we have, the K through 12 kids up there, I'm like, you guys are awesome. Y'all are doing
Yeah,
great stuff.
it is so cool. Just the amount of work that they put in beforehand, and then for them to go up on
Mhm.
stage. I mean, it's incredible to I mean, I think my son's head would explode if he stepped out in front of that many people.
Mhm. But the ones that go up there, they're totally fine. They
I
don't
know,
even
I know. It's
it's like
crazy.
for them, it seems like for them, and I'm sure they're nervous. I'm sure they have nerves, but they just are up there like, there's 5 people here. We're just chatting at school, we're just giving a presentation to our class, no big
I
deal.
know.
And most of us adults are, back there like sweating it and just, nerve balls, which I haven't done a plenary or anything like that. So I'm like, I would probably fall out, but so kudos to them. I'm going to switch tracks a little bit with you and ask you about your adjunct faculty positions and what do you teach, and is it online or in person? How does that work for you? I'm an adjunct as well at a university part time too, so I'm with you in that space. It's kind of interesting when you've got your full time role and then you're teaching part time. But I love incorporating GIS and just geospatial concepts into the program and the classes that I teach. Just I'm in an emergency management program, and so
Oh,
I just
cool.
want them to have the exposure and be able to talk to their GIS person when they get to an EOC
Yeah.
or whatever like that. So tell us a little bit about what you teach and
Cool.
all the deets on that.
Yeah, so I say this to everybody too. I mean, I've talked to folks at Esri, or there's others that are, outside of Esri, just in the, the geospatial community, that are, interested in teaching. And how I got into it is I literally went to a local, university. At the time I was working, or, in Milwaukee. And I literally just biked over to the university, went over to the geography department and said, "Hey, I'm, in Milwaukee, and I'm, a crime analyst at the police department. Like, are there any courses?" And I can't remember the professor's name now, but he literally, like, basically handed me the intro textbook. He said, "It starts in 3 weeks. Here you go. And what else do you need?" And I was like, "Okay, all right. Well, that was interesting."
That
And
was easy.
yeah, I mean, that's how I got into it. And it's like, if you like to teach, if it's something you want to do, like, there are opportunities out there. Like, just reach out and go see about it. And so that was kind of my first time doing it, was doing an intro course. Then I moved to Boston and ended up doing, working at Salem State and kind of teaching an intro GIS course for both graduates and undergraduates. Did a Python course, and now I'm teaching at RIT. And so the one at RIT I've done at, out in Rochester, is all remote. So I'm doing an asynchronous course, it's called. And so it's basically, every week, kind of the content, everything gets released. I'm there with office hours. We'll kind of have live, like, chats, etc., in Slack, but it's all kind of do at your own pace. And so it's a very different format than I was used to in the past. Of, at Salem State, I was driving in, kind of seeing everybody, in the classrooms and in the labs. So it's fun, but it's a really different experience for kind of getting stuff set up, running through the class, and, seeing people face to face, just via, Zoom calls every once in a while. But the
Mhm.
course I do now is, it's a graduate level, basically kind of intro, um, geospatial data science course is the one I'm going to run this fall, and then usually do kind of just an intro GIS course in the spring. So usually just kind of one course, in each semester. And it's, as you said, it's, balancing kind of the daytime hat with the kind of adjunct thing. Like, at times it's crazy and there's a lot going on, but it's, yeah, I just love kind of, especially being on the education team, when I've got to can actually talk the talk with, the faculty and everybody else I'm working with. And I get the pains, and I understand, what needs to be done with it. So it really kind of helps in those discussions.
Mhm. I'm sure it does. I was about, well, no, okay. Let me get my brain together.
You're good.
I had all the trains collide. So, talk to me a little bit about how your experience as an adjunct faculty member influences your role supporting customers. So, you're there in the space, you're hearing the pain points, you're hearing the things that they feel like they need or the things that they're wanting, and then you're back in your role at Esri going, okay, what have I been hearing? How do we apply that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think that has been a huge helpful part of that experience and of the adjunct experience. And one example of that is a big project we've, have kind of the first iteration out of, which is kind of a set of tutorials and lessons called our modern GIS tutorial series. And so it's basically kind of an intro GIS course that's supported by Esri Academy, Learn Lessons, and then articles and information kind of throughout Esri Press. And so, a faculty member, an instructor, a lot of times I'll be talking to them and they go, "Oh my God, I need to, update, I got to use, get ArcGIS Online into this, or I need to use these tools." And I say, "Cool. Here's this website. It has, 8 specific, air quotes weeks of content by categories, and you can use any of this. There's slides." And so that was one of those things where, for me, even like in my course, I'll use kind of pieces and parts of that because we
Mhm.
built that out. And as I go to start my weeks and go, "Oh, I need something imagery related, and we need a quick lab or a lesson to run students through." And hey, here are 3 fantastic ones that Esri has built out. I can just grab this, use this, and then students can submit their kind of finished work for it for grading. But yeah, just kind of putting myself in those shoes has been really, really helpful. And it just kind of lets me see more clearly what some of the needs are, and um, yeah, just be able to kind of speak the language.
That has to be super helpful, and I'm sure that the other faculty appreciate that too, for you to be able to connect them, and so they're not just sitting there pulling their hair out trying to figure
Yeah,
it out.
I know. Cause I think a lot of times, right, and I think this is the case everywhere, but it's, I can remember certain times, people would say, you'd be at the user conference and like, "Hey, when is this like bug going to be fixed, or when is that?" And we were like, "Oh, well, it's coming out at version, or it's fixed at 3, da, da, da," or whatever, making up a number. And then on the flip side, this faculty member is like stuck at that version because their IT is holding them there, or, XYZ. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of times there's reasons people might be having a problem, but if you don't kind of ask or dig a little bit deeper into what the reason for that challenge is, then you just kind of don't understand it. And that disconnect can be in place a lot of times.
Have you seen a change in students during the time that you've been teaching? Have you seen either the students, you know, the students themselves being different? Do you see a difference in kind of volume of students? Do you see a difference in kind of the students' perspective on what you're teaching change?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a couple different ways. And it's tough for me to give like one broad generalization because of like the different
Mhm.
programs and different kind of students. But um, I think the one thing that's or one thing that just jumped into my mind, and I hear this from faculty all the time, is the main way students are interacting with technology now is kind of via a phone or via devices that aren't necessarily PCs. And
Mhm.
so the still kind of core like file management and data management side of GIS, they have to spend a lot more time on, and a lot more kind of in the weeds on, hey, you might not see the file, but you have to click a folder, and then it might be in a subfolder. And you have to go a little deeper, and just even understanding how kind of PC like file architecture works. So those kinds of things are like new now, newer to kind of go through and understand when you're maybe used to a very simple, Google Drive-ish kind of experience where you just search for something and hey, it pops up. You don't have to really worry about the structure of where things live. And then the other side of it is, I think, there's students that are like getting exposed to GIS or seeing kind of what it is a little bit sooner. And so there's students that are either like completely aware or still like those that don't know what it is at all. So you kind of get both of those sides in courses, which is really interesting. And then also like some of the, especially at RIT, I'm blown away by the proficiency of some of the students coming in with like their programming or,
Mhm.
just their backgrounds there. Where I remember last semester I had a lesson where students had to start in ArcGIS Pro, then we did the same process in a notebook and we did something somewhere else. And half the students said, oh, the notebook was just fantastic. It was so much easier. All they wanted to do was just type in, Python commands and just get right to it. And then some of the students who, weren't from that world said, oh, we like the UI. We much preferred like seeing what we're doing and navigating it that way. So almost just the backgrounds of students has just been a lot more diverse, I think.
So we've talked about how the students have changed. So how has the GIS education space changed over the years since you've been plugged in?
Um, I would say it's the biggest shift is that kind of buzzword I just said of like modern GIS, of that move from desktop to more web based. So even coming up in a couple of weeks, we've got a webinar that's going to be trying to highlight how faculty could teach an intro course with just ArcGIS Online or web-based tools. Like that is feasible now. And that's still, I think, a hard pill to swallow for some of like, I've been in a desktop environment or I've been using kind of desktop tools for forever. That's what GIS has been. But there's been a really big shift in the ways we can use this technology now and in the ways, honestly, I think like the first exposure for students, I always go back to my intro course and, spending the first like 5 weeks just like looking at, I don't even know what, like our catalog and wondering like what the heck we were even doing here. Versus, in week one, you could start students in the Living Atlas. They could be looking at real time, wildfire information and the impacts on populations or what, drive times are for out of cities. If there's an impending, that's just one use case, but there's all of these different ways that you can kind of connect students to how powerful this technology is. And then you can crush their hopes and dreams, with data models and projections. But it's, I like to think of it as like that flip. There's so many different things we can show and expose to with this tech. It's amazing. And yes, there are fundamentals like you need to know and understand as a professional. But let's get to coordinate systems like in the fourth week or like eventually. And like first, let's excite everybody.
We don't have to run everybody off in the first week,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like I know, I remember it's almost like the rite of passage. Like you need to like make it brutal and hard because that's what we went through,
Mhm.
or like that's what some of our exposure was. But yeah, I mean, every field has like parts that can be more complex, or there's complexities there. But yeah, there's also so many kind of cool things on the surface that can be done. So let's start there and get people
Yeah,
excited.
absolutely. I love that. I agree with that. Where do you see GIS as a technology and a science heading? Where are we going?
Where are we going? I think it's just, for me, it's just broadened so much. I mean, I think that's the one thing that's really exciting is, and if I bring it back to one anecdote for a second, we had or I had a presentation at a university a couple months back, and it was for their Japanese poetry course.
Oh, interesting.
And exactly. And so the students were building out story maps of these historical cities and historical sites in Japan where these poets had written about, or the sites. And, they were kind of getting historical documents to compare how things had changed or what inspired the poets in those certain locations. And for me, that just painted this picture of like how much stuff has changed in the past, 5-10 years. Where, 10 years ago, GIS was in the geography department, it was in the planning department, it was in, a little bit of engineering surveying side. And that's for sure, like people have been making maps in history and all that in different areas, but it was a lot more limited for where those users were. And I think because of the technology was a little bit harder to dive into, versus now, within an hour, students can be, adding points to maps, looking at data, analyzing information. And like those students in that Japanese poetry class, they're all building story maps. They're creating these amazing, products showing paths and showing historical documents. And it's really just kind of opened up the doors to really anybody. And again, it's like location, spatial awareness touches every single field. So I think like that kind of broadening of the base of GIS has been really exciting to see. And then from there, people can specialize and, dive just wholeheartedly into the field. But, um, just the fact that location is kind of the base of so much. Um, and again, it goes back to like the thread throughout this whole conversation is just trying to get that exposure to, students and others at a younger age of like what this technology is, how it impacts them, how they could potentially use it. And, I say it probably too much. It's like in a lot of these courses, I just say, hey, you don't need to get a PhD in data science or a PhD in GIS, but even this one course, could be that skill set or that tool that you can use at a nonprofit or at, the local government or wherever agency you go on to. And you could build a dashboard, you could build tools, you can build applications that are going to be incredibly valuable and useful, at that organization. And this is the only little skill set you need right now, and that could be all you ever need to have, and it's going to be really, really valuable.
It can be really impactful for those little
Oh yeah.
organizations. Well, for anywhere, when they take that and have just the little bit of the skill set like you're describing and make such a huge impact when a company doesn't have GIS people or doesn't have someone that can do that. It's
Yeah.
huge what a difference it can make.
Yeah, and it does not take a lot of,
Mhm.
I still am blown away when, people have a spreadsheet of points or just like, you know, oh, I wish we had a way to quickly visualize this information. And, it's as simple as drag drop and wow, let's get a quick kind of density analysis of this, or let's understand. We have an amazing lesson up on the Learn site is safe streets to schools. So it's just dots on a map of schools, the walk times from those schools, and then doing a simple join for accidents that have taken place within those school kind of walk times. And now you know which schools you need to have kind of policies in place or get kind of safer streets in those areas to make it this huge impact. And that again is something somebody could do in about 20 minutes and they could do for their community.
That's amazing. It's super cool that we've come to that point, that
Yeah.
the technology and the science has moved to the point where it can be that easy and readily available.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool.
So, how will all of that we just discussed, how is that going to influence your approach to engineering solutions and demos going forward?
Good question. So I mean, a lot of what we do now is just try to expose people to probably like the broadest things that they can then take. So my challenge a lot of times is just that there is so much and that we want to kind of expose, students and researchers and faculty to everything they have. Um, and we can't, we would just overwhelm and scare everybody if we go and open up City Engine and start applying rules because it's not the right place for the broadest audience. So for me, it's the challenge is always trying to find those 1 to 2 to 3 things that will have the kind of broadest, applicability for the audience. And so, like when I'm building out a demonstration or when I'm building out a proof of concept, it's like what kind of core things do I want to ensure that will have that kind of broad impact? And for me, it might seem silly, but one of the ones I'm still like the most excited about is like the Living Atlas.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's if I think of a lot of like intro courses or a lot of GIS programs, they're still going out to download census files and data from external sources, which is a great skill and necessary. But going back to like making things exciting and showing the applicability of this stuff really quickly, within 20 seconds, you could have mapped like all of the census data from 2020 or 2022 and start asking questions of it, start looking at it and there's all these amazing ways to kind of visualize that data. So it's just how can you kind of show quickly, the power of these tools, the technology, how things have changed. And again, Like for me, it's thinking like what small changes can faculty make? And
Mhm.
without having them like blow up an entire course, like what is one way they can kind of change stuff? And that's a really simple one where, hey, in your lesson for the census data, why don't you just go grab like the Living Atlas data here? And instead of like having them work on a join in that first lab, have them ask some deeper questions of the data that's there, or have them ask questions about, what limitations does this data set have, or other places it could go get information from. So there's just, I guess that it's always kind of trying to stay on top of like what is the broadest applicable thing that we can do and kind of continue to kind of help move education forward.
I love that too. And the Living Atlas has so much data in it. It's just right there at your fingertips. So if folks aren't using the Living Atlas or haven't started using it, reach out to us. Let us get you plugged in with that because it's just a ton of resources and information right there that you can start, like you said, start using and playing with immediately and
Yeah.
exploring and analyzing. It's just Esri's done it for you. It's right there.
Yeah. I mean, one of the ones that I do all the time, and one of my demos is just pulling up, it's Living Atlas, adding some demographic data. And then there's a ton of amazing kind of real-time data sets on there. And the one I love is the Air Now data set. So it's all of the real-time air quality indicators across the country, and there's even ones across the globe. So, you add the demographic data, you say, oh, let's look at, these census tracts by race or Hispanic origin, and let's zoom in and let's add air quality indicators on. And are there some correlations? Definitely. And you can kind of see those now spatially with just those two simple data sets. And, you tell faculty, hey, this was updated 20 minutes ago. Like these are real time, air quality measures across the entire country, along with, the demographic data. And now you can just start using it. Like you don't have to, it's good to have the skills to build it, of course, but that comes later.
Absolutely. So, Brian, before we wrap up today, I have loved this conversation so much. I knew you were going to be great. I knew it was going to be fun, but I just feel like there's so much good stuff in here for people. I'm so excited about this one. So, I want to say thank you so much for bringing such a great, perspective and vibe and personality. Like you've been super fun today. So thank you. I knew you would be though. Like it's not a surprise. I
Well,
knew you would.
no, thank you. Yeah, thank you again so much, Melissa. Really appreciate it. It was so fun to do this. And yeah, just so glad you guys are kind of getting these really cool experiences and voices kind of pulled in. So I certainly didn't kind of blow anybody else out of the water, but this was fantastic. So really fun to do. Thank you.
Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up for the day? Is there anything I didn't touch on that you wanted me to or thought I might, or anything else you wanted to add?
No, my one close is just again like if you are sitting in a GIS course and you are wondering what the heck you are doing there, just kind of think of like what is the one little thing that can make it applicable for you or that you could take on. Because as for me or for you, Melissa, and others, like I sitting in my intro course, I did not think I was gonna like end up in this field or be kind of in the GIS world. But it was this kind of one skill set I could put on my resume, have as a line item, and it's kind of gotten me really, really far. And I've grown to kind of love and always love kind of applying this. So, just even if you get a little bit of exposure, be bold and kind of take it into an area and apply it wherever you want to.
I think that's amazing advice. That's awesome. Thanks so much, Brian. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Melissa.
Brian and I had such a good conversation. He really, did a really good job of walking us through a lot of topics that are relative and important to the education space, since that's his focus, obviously. But, he and I both are adjunct faculty members at different colleges, but we share that common space. And so we have experiences to be able to, talk about and walk through. And that was really enjoyable for me. I thought he did a great job. He was super interesting. He had a really interesting journey that I didn't expect. I didn't expect him to have lived in so many different places and have done the Peace Corps and just all the things that he's done, moved to Hawaii and took jobs all over just to get all those experiences. And so I just thought it was really interesting to listen to Brian and to let him tell his story and talk to us about the products and the things that they do in the education space, trying to promote geography and GIS, trying to make sure the universities and the schools have what they need, and putting out really good products that people can use. So I hope that conversation was beneficial for the listeners, and that anybody in the education space goes and checks out the resources that are in the show notes to be able to better help you with your classes. And if you're offering GIS and trying to figure out how to get that off the ground, Brian's an excellent resource. He's very active on LinkedIn. He and his team would be more than happy to help get you paired up with the right products and services. So, don't hesitate to reach out to them. But I just really am excited that we were able to bring Brian on and have those conversations. That wraps up today's episode. Please feel free to reach out with your comments, or if you have an interesting topic that you would like to hear, please let us know. Thanks again for your time, and tune in for our next podcast.